Hello and welcome to the Supernatural track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z. Martin, and tonight we are doing the Supernatural Fight Club Season 6. Do you agree with the episodes that Entertainment Weekly deemed essential? Yes? No? Ready to fight about it? We're going to talk through Season 6 and talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. But first, we're going to have our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Carole.
Hi, I'm Carole Stokes. I've been a fan since season 3. I started writing fanfic in 2012. All of my fanfic is on AO3 under Firesign 10. And you will find me on Twitter under true_Firesign 10. You'll also find me here on Continual and in the
Supernatural TFWNC.
Thank you. I cannot get that out of my mouth. But yes, you'll find me on that Facebook page too.
Elektra.
I'm Elektra Hammond. I'm a writer and an editor, and you can find everything about me at untilmidnight.com.
Melissa?
I'm Melissa. I've been a fan since the pilot. You can find me online at the Facebook group that Carole mentioned, because I can never remember it either, or stalking people on AO3 because I'm a huge fanfic reader.
And I'm Gail Z. Martin. And Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, near future, post-apocalyptic fiction, and more. And as Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all the modern worlds are ones Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. And I run the Supernatural TFWNC, which is Team Free Will North Carolina group on Facebook. And most of the time I'm here on Continual. So let's talk about season 6. Now, before we got started, Elektra pointed out this is the first non-Kripke season. And Carole said, and it shows. So let's just air that and get it out, because it really does color everything else that comes afterwards. So, all right, them's fighting words, lead off.
This season is not as cohesive, particularly compared to season 5, which was really, really cohesive and had a good solid arc and like almost no filler. This season has a couple of super high points and a couple of really, they just didn't need to make that episodes going on in there. And the villain is, well, they thought they knew who the villain was, and then they thought they knew who the villain was, and then they really weren't sure, and it just kept, they really couldn't make up their mind what they were doing with this season. And it ebbed and flowed, and you really weren't sure where it was going. So it was very unfocused for me, what they were doing, leading into season 7, which is just, for me, the worst season ever. And then they figured out what they were doing, and it really got good.
Mm-hmm. Carole, you loudly agreed when Elektra first said that, so.
I concur that there is a lot of floundering in this season. We're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing the other thing. Not some uninteresting monsters of the week, particularly, let's say, I enjoyed You Can't Handle the Truth with Veritas. That was cute. I certainly enjoyed Weekend at Bobby's, which I really liked, both because I really enjoyed a glimpse at Bobby's life, you know, that behind the scenes of Bobby, and it being, of course, the first directorial episode with Jensen. And I thought Jensen did a terrific job with it, directing it. But I thought the first half of the season overall was very, like Elektra said, unstructured, uncohesive. They're kind of flopping around like a fish out of water. Now, second half of the season picks up a little bit. They do French Mistake, and which of course is a huge fan favorite, because who doesn't love Sam and Dean playing Jared and Jensen? It's hilarious, and they have a lot of jokes.
Sam and Dean.
I'm sorry?
Sam and Dean playing Jared and Jensen playing Sam and
playing
Dean.
Sam and Dean. I mean, it's great. The meta is great. The boys are well in this. Okay, I love them in that. Followed by, and then there were none, which was the con worm, which I thought was also a fascinating episode. And the body count goes boop, 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 and we lose a couple of, important people. And it really takes the last 5 seasons for me, for it to finally come together in some interlocking manner and raise that quality of the writing and everything back up, because it's never the performing. The performing is always great. Okay, you could give Jared and Jensen a script for a mop commercial, okay, and it's gonna rock. So, but the writing, it took until like those last 5 episodes that we finally get to that point. I lost Melissa. We finally get to the point where everything is actually meshing, making sense, building up to something. And then to the finale, which, by the way, is the only Kripke episode in the season and is wonderful. It's like basically the 3 faces of Sam, okay? And it's terrific. Jensen acts the hell out of it. It moves, it's tightly woven. We're finally getting some of those last strings up together. But man, it took us most of the season to get there. And coming off, as Elektra said, the tightly woven season 5, and just in general, every episode being meaningful in the first 5 seasons, to have these episodes where we're kind of like, what's happening here? We're collecting alphas. Let's go, something's happening with Carole. Oh, look, fairies. It's a bit tough. It's a tough transition.
How about you, Melissa?
Unpopular opinion. Most of this season made me long for the Leviathans.
Ooh, okay.
There were some good moments, but most of the time I was like, I'd almost rather see the Leviathans than this.
Cut to the goo. Give us the goo and move on.
And the borax, and we're done.
And the borax.
Again, there were some wonderful Monster of the Week episodes, and we got some ones that were really fun, like Frontierland and The French Mistake, of course. And I happen to like the Clap Your Hands If You Believe, because honestly, why didn't the guys tangle more with the Fae? And actually, we did a whole.
Do we ever get the Fae again?
Yes, absolutely. We did a whole panel talking about the Fae and supernatural, but they weren't always called Fae. And I had to look it up on Super Wiki. They were around more than you'd think. I loved the idea of Soulless Sam, and he looked great without a shirt. But by the time they could have done more with that. The Campbells, how did Mary have such an awful family? And now thanks to Sam and Dean, they don't have any cousins. Yeah. So I agree with the unevenness. You get some standout episodes. You get some like Balthazar not sinking the Titanic, that was just, okay, why is this here? I mean,
and yet again, like Balthazar himself was not an uninteresting character. He was fun. People really liked him. He added like this kind of Dean Martin vibe to Supernatural, about, let's just eat, drink, and be merry, and, have a, what do they call an orgy for 12? I mean, so that, things like that. And like you say, even in Clap Your Hands, now I really like Robert Picardo, and I thought he was terrific as the Leprechaun. But here they hint at this power that could be so great, it might return Sam's soul. And poof, never hear of it again. Never address it. There could have been more instances of us dealing with this, and not even in season 6, but overall, but they posit it in season 6, and then it's like Jesse, it goes to Australia or something. And yeah, so there definitely are great moments, even in some of the lesser episodes. I totally concur to that.
But it totally lacked the coherence that season 4 and 5 had.
Right. And the evenness in terms of what was happening. It's kind of like,
And who the bad guy was, as Elektra said, we didn't have a solid target to fight against. The alpha vampire was actually kind of cool.
he would have been great,
He could have made a great ally under other circumstances.
Well, and Eve was sort of the villain for a bit, and Crowley was kind of the villain, and they were working their way up to making Cass the villain, but they weren't really sure.
And Eve was a little underwhelming. I thought the idea of her was really interesting. And she's calling up all these Earth forces to create all these monsters and make Jefferson starships and things. But she never.
But they revisit that and have Michael do it again in season 14 because they decided it was a good idea and everybody would forget.
Well, and the other thing they do in season 6 and a lot of season 7 is they're fixated on what happens in purgatory. That's the whole thing about the alpha vamps. That's the whole thing about Eve. And then somehow when Dean and Cass get zapped away at the end of season 7, it never occurs to Sam that, hey, he could be in purgatory, that place we've been talking about for the last season and a half.
Well, what they were talking about was not so much, they kept saying, well, what's important is it's near to hell and we want the real estate because it's a cool place. But what they really wanted to do is pull the souls out. Yep. And at the end of the finale, they pulled all the souls out and they were using them, Cass used them to become God. That was the whole point. Mm-hmm. And at that point, it was less interesting because theoretically there wasn't anybody left there. It wasn't that it was an interesting place. It was that it was full of power.
Yeah. And that soul bomb thing gets used again and again and again. Come on, guys, think of something.
I think the only redeeming moment for me in the Titanic one, My Heart Will Go On, would be Sam and Dean trying to walk through the jugglers with the fire and the knives. That was a great moment. That was it.
That episode had a lot of fun moments. I mean, the little pieces like them driving a Mustang, which apparently had been the original plan until somebody realized you couldn't throw a body in the trunk.
And that's an important criteria.
Well,
for them it is. I know it really is, but it's just funny to say, we can't throw a body in there. No, that one's out.
It's a great muscle car. It's fun to drive, but it just doesn't have the trunk room they're going to need.
Exactly.
Oh, and that gave us another AU idea of what could have been because we got to see Bobby and Jody get together.
No,
and
Bobby
then,
and Ellen. Bobby and Ellen.
Bobby and Ellen get together. And of course, that's all wiped away. So you win some, you lose something
and
else.
That's a big pairing for background in fanfic.
Yeah.
Bobby is usually, if he's with anybody, because he isn't always with somebody, but if he's with anybody, it's either Jody or Ellen, so that was interesting. That was fun to see.
Well, and you get to see Bobby happy, which is
very rare.
Nice.
But there were so many throwaways. I mean, you got to see in the one episode, you got to see the demon Ellsworth, the demonic equivalent of Bobby with the research and the phones, and then they immediately killed him. That was just, oh God, I wanted to see more of him.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the passing thing with Lovecraft.
Mm-hmm.
Which is unfortunately problematic. The fact that they have Lovecraft being a part of the mythos, that he's the one who brought Eleanor into our world, and she's just been kicking around ever since.
But it was just very kind of like scotch taped together. You know what I mean? Like, oh, let's do this. We'll have this thing where he created a door. You know? I was like, what? What's going on? I mean, I loved Frontierland. I thought Frontierland was great. And clearly they had so much fun. I really liked The Man Who Would Be King, because that was from Cass's point of view, which is not a point of view we really ever see much. And I don't say this because I'm a huge Cass fan, because I'm not, but but I liked this episode being from hush, Melissa. If Melissa has a stroke, it's my fault. I'll put her on my insurance. It was from his point of view, and just like the Weekend at Bobby's, it's really neat to see an episode through someone else's eyes, you know, and not just what's happening with the Winchesters. But I loved the way we saw him creeping around and then they caught him. I love the way they trapped him, you know, and realized he is not, you know.
They didn't even trap him. He
Oh,
did it
yeah.
himself. He misspoke.
Well, they dangled it though. They dangled it. They set him up because they knew this would be the only way he ever would have heard that. And then when he regurgitated it, they knew, you know, about the.
That's the episode that gives us the backstory on him and Raphael.
Right.
And
so
we get the interesting stories of from the different heavens.
Right.
He prefers Tuesday afternoons.
Yeah.
And,
see,
and
that's what I
Raphael is hanging out in Ken Lay's heaven.
Yeah. Because I thought that this one had a lot of meat to it because of that. You know, like all of this stuff you're mentioning was really interesting to learn. So for me, that was a really interesting.
It was critical backstory that we had needed for most of the season that they finally decided they better give us.
Right.
Because the season was coming to an end and we were missing what the heck. Cass kept saying, I'm fighting a war, I'm fighting a war, I'm busy. And we didn't know what was going on.
Yep.
And at that point, we didn't know he was working with Crowley. And that's the episode where we find out.
Right. And we need all of that, because otherwise we're going to get to the end in 2 more episodes and we're not going to understand why he's doing what he's doing and why it is so crucial to his hoped for success in the war and everything. So they were kind of, you know, so that was, I thought, a good, strong episode.
There's 2 more I want to point out that I think are super important. One is Appointment at Samara, where Dean gets to wear Death's ring for a day, and you start to see the beginning of the relationship between Dean and Death, and that Death really has a soft spot for Dean.
Mm-hmm.
And I always have to go around and clean up your messes, and you guys are making messes on a global scale.
Quick mirror interjection about the messes. That then later on we have Crowley telling Cass, I have to keep cleaning up your messes. So once again, we have a little mirror there, but sorry.
I have a real soft spot for that particular episode, and the talk about the natural order of things, because that does become a big thing later in the series.
Absolutely.
And my guilty pleasure from this season that always gives me a warm fuzzy is Live Free or Twy Hard. I cannot watch that episode without watching Dean run after the guy into the alley, stop him, chase away the girl, look at the guy and say, wait, are you wearing glitter? And the guy looks at him and says, I do it to get laid. Does it work? Yeah. And just after always seeing vampires and how bad vamps are in this universe and how scary, that they took time to really rag on Twilight was a real warm and fuzzy for me.
I'm with you on that.
and that's a serious episode, because you understand that maybe the Campbells have been at this for a long time and they have a cure and it does work, and that maybe there's something even more seriously wrong with Sam.
Well, that's it. Yeah, the depth of realizing he's not just a little off. There's something deep down wrong.
And there are pieces of this that they never really get into. And I find myself wondering if Samuel worked with Sam for a year before they brought Dean into it. Did he really not notice anything was a little off about Sam until Dean brought it up?
No, because he sent him off to the back 40 to break the horses.
And did Samuel come back a little off? Because as you point out, are the Campbells really that bad? When Dean went back to see them in the past, they didn't seem that off. So maybe he came back not quite right either. Sometimes dead is better.
Yeah. Melissa?
Yeah, you know, starting to laugh, right?
I'm
Nice,
sorry,
Jill.
some of us went to see Pet Cemetery in the theater.
The Live Free and Twihard has a couple of moments where it breaks my heart when Sam, that moment in the alley when you realize Sam's not Sam, because he's not rushing forward to save Dean. He's not ripping apart the vampire that hurt Dean. Like that was really, to me, that was like a knife in the heart. The Sumerian episode is one of my favorites because I love that death. Billy death is good too, but the original death, he had all that swagger and that gravitas while he's eating his junk food. I just loved the way that character worked.
I give myself a little treat before I put the ring back on.
Well, Entertainment Weekly picked fewer episodes. Remember last time in season 5, they picked more episodes than usual. We have fewer in season 6. Weekend at Bobby's, French Mistake, The Man Who Would Be King, The Man Who Knew Too Much, and that's it. 4 episodes as being essential. Everything else was not. And I question that. Much as I love French Mistake, I think it's in there more because it's everybody's favorite than that it was exceptionally pivotal to the arc compared to some of the other episodes that were left out.
I thought Caged Heat was a powerful episode because we learn about that even if Sam were to get his soul back, it's a little shreddy thing between Michael and Lucifer clawing it to pieces in the cage for, hundreds of years. And then the whole thing about how Crowley is holding all these monsters prisoner, all these alphas, all these different monsters. We learn more about the civil war in heaven. And in the end, Sam's like, you know what? I don't even want my soul back.
Well, and also that is the episode where Crowley dies, at least as far as we know.
Right.
That's a really pivotal episode.
And we've got Meg as a frenemy. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in that episode. I think it's very meaty and very, once again, positional. We have that right before Samara. So it's a 1-2. We have Caged Heat, Samara, and then at least we're in better position for that second half of the season.
Well, and I'll pull out, I had a bunch that I listed as kind of honorable mentions. They're not like essential, but, and the first one I'd pull up would be Third Man, which is the introduction of Balthazar. Because he is one of my favorite characters, but partly because Sebastian Roche is one of my favorite actors, no matter what I see him in. And that is where you get to meet him. And you find out that he's the one who's got access to all of the weapons of heaven. And that is where he talks about the orgies and everything else. And you get to understand just what kind of guy he is.
And then we also find out about how angry Raphael is. He is.
Which on a scale of 1 to 10 is about 200.
Yeah, exactly. So that's important for us. We don't see him a lot through the episode, but it's a factor because it ties into that whole Cass's struggle, the Civil War. He didn't get what he wanted before with Dean becoming Michael and getting all of that kind of good stuff. So he's pissed. And we find out about how pissed he is.
They leave out that kind of frames the whole season as Exile on Main Street. We saw Dean go to Lisa, and then all of a sudden, Dean's back, Sam's back. Well, what happened? That does kind of frame up. Sam was with the Campbells. Why wasn't he around for a year? Is something not quite right with Sammy? As well as Dean being kind of pulled in two directions here on wanting to be with Sam and feeling responsible for what he's built with Lisa. And so if you eliminate that, if the idea with the essentials list was, okay, if you only watch 75 episodes of Supernatural, you can watch these 75 and get the gist of it, you're missing a big chunk for this season.
You
And
would
that's a
think
big-
that one has to be in there. Oddly, I didn't get the Dean really wants to be with Sam from Exile on Main Street so much as he wanted to know Sam was alive. But a year later, he really was happy, and he probably would have been happy staying with Lisa and hanging with Sam occasionally if he could find a way to do it and keep Lisa safe. I mean, he really loved Lisa and Ben, although I do not understand why he was driving a beige truck. I
think
mean,
he
it
did-
was beige. It was so dull and not Dean-like.
I
Maybe
agree
that was the
that he
point.
definitely really did love Lisa as much as he could.
Yes.
And the same thing with, I think he loved Ben much more unconditionally, but he loved Lisa as much as he could. And that's a big theme throughout the whole episode, because he keeps kind of going back to her. He goes back to her when he's back and forth at the beginning. And she finally is like, well, why do you have to do either or? Let's do both, or then he goes to see her as a vampire. And then they talk to her during Veritas. And she's like, the minute I saw Sam, I knew it was over. And which is a great fanfic moment, by the way. And until the end, where they use her, the demons are using her, and Crowley uses her as bait and a trap for Dean to the point of killing her. She gets her, Castiel heals her and wipes her memory, and it is so painful to Dean that he tells Sam, if you ever mention her again, I'm going to break your nose.
Okay,
So
there was
clearly he really, really loved her. But on the other hand, I think he knew if Sam was back, he could never be with her.
there was another beautiful mirror in there that you just edged by. When he was in the vampire episode, he mentioned a best-selling book, and he's like, guy watching a woman while she sleeps. That's like really creepy, stalkery stuff. And then he goes, and when he's a vampire, he goes and he does it to Lisa.
Yep.
And that's one of my hot button issues with the Twilight stuff, is just how creepy and stalkery that stuff all was. So
Among all its various other
bragging
issues.
more on Twilight, but also the fact that he picked up on how creepy it was, and then he turned around and went and did it as soon as he was a vampire.
Yep.
Melissa, you've been quiet.
Because really, it's interesting to me, the Exile on Main Street. I don't know how you leave that episode out, like everybody said. And I agree that Dean loves her as much as he's able to love her. But I also think Dean loves the idea of being able to be normal and apple pie if Sam's not around. And to me, the minute Sam's not around, that whole thing of loving the idea of being normal is done. He still cares about Lisa. He still loves Lisa as much as he can. And he still loves Ben as much as he can. But that whole idea of being in love with normal is done. He's like, okay. And I think that's, it's like, okay, I'm staying here now because of obligation, rather than I really, really love this woman. Like, he loves her, but it's not, he doesn't love her as much as he loves Sam. He loves his brother, and they have that bond, that familial bond. They
And I
can't
think
break it.
I think they show that in a really great way when he finally goes into the garage and he sweeps the tarp off the Impala, and there
Yeah.
she is. And like, you just know he's, he is happy. He's happy in a way he has not been happy that whole year, while he's trying to be somebody he really isn't. And, saying, oh yeah, I was in pest control. You can't believe what those possums do or whatever.
And that's why he's driving a beige truck. Because the
Yes.
beige truck is the absolute, I think the writers sat around and said, okay, what's the absolute opposite of baby? Dean's working construction. What's the absolute opposite of baby? Beige truck. There you go.
And we find out later it's actually a Fiat.
Which is even worse.
So it's not even an American truck.
That's right. No, I mean the one that the alternate Winchesters.
Oh gosh.
Oh, God.
Winchester, man
Rich
buns.
Chesters.
Oh,
Yeah,
The Rich Chesters.
the Rich
Rich
Chesters,
Chesters.
yes. How they got both of them in that Fiat remains a mystery.
I think they
Sam
would have
did
used a
it.
smart car if they could have put them both in it.
Yes.
Maybe it was a Tesseract.
The follow on to that to Exile on Main Street, 2.5 Men, is only important in that it shows us the Campbell compound. And we get to see that the predecessor to the bunker.
Mm-hmm.
We get to see that,
Other people did that.
hunters can have a place, and Samuel's office, and eventually the library.
Mhm.
Where did, and all of the books from the various Campbell ancestors.
Mhm.
Moisha Campbell, who met H.P. Lovecraft, and that they had Colt's Journal.
Mhm.
Apparently, the Campbells have been doing this for a long time. I can't believe they didn't empty out that library, but I guess they had no place safe to put it.
Yeah.
Not
not
until they
yet.
had, well, nothing ever says that they don't go back once they have the bunker and take the place apart.
Yeah,
I
I
had a
find
really-
myself wondering who actually owned that property.
Mhm.
I had a hard time with, accepting the fact that here we had Dean with a baby and he didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah,
Right?
Can we talk about Sam?
Sam?
He's been there and he's
No,
done
Dean
that.
didn't know what to do with it. Dean was the one who was out buying diapers and stuff. It was
Right,
Sam
but
who was
he's like, it's
clueless.
crying. I don't know what to do. And he's like,
Yeah.
at it. I mean, no, Dean would have been able to deal with that. That was a little retconny to me.
That was very a continuity problem for me, that
Yeah.
because he would have known exactly what to
Yeah.
do with that baby. And the whole excuse of, well, Lisa's got nephews or whatever, it should have been, I raised you. I know what to do.
Right.
yeah.
John wasn't in there changing those diapers.
No.
Well, and I think Unforgiven is another one. Is that a Buck Lemming episode? It has the Buck Lemming scent to it.
It's Dab.
Is it? Well, there.
Dab
there-
Laughlin.
It's
There
Dab.
you go.
Because okay, this takes Sam's dick of death to a whole new extreme. Now it's not just one at a time. It's like all these people.
Multiple.
Yeah, and why?
But we
You
all
know,
wanted to be that bit player who was the woman in the bathroom.
yeah. So it's an arachne. That one and Like a Virgin, I thought were not playing to the best representation of the boys and kind of exploitive.
It was really funny to see Dean trying to get the sword out of the stone, but it was also like, come on, Dean's funny, but he's not
Stupid.
Yeah,
Right.
and like it just didn't jive. I laughed, but it was kind of like a forced laugh. They forced us into feeling that laugh. It was not natural. It's the best.
Those episodes were kind of throwaway.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
other
I feel-
other than the dragons end up with Eve, they could have tossed
Right.
those in.
Right.
Right.
Well,
I feel the
Could have
same way about,
squeezed that into another episode
yeah.
for all that was,
Mannequin-
and we got dragons and we never see dragons again.
Yeah.
They
But
went with the
Bobby-
fairies,
kind of a Hogwarts.
They're in Australia.
with the fairies. So.
Well,
fairy land.
And Mannequin 3, The Reckoning,
Oh,
that one, you know, I remember a Twilight Zone episode with, evil mannequins that still gives me the creeps all these years later. This really could have been that. But the whole haunted organ thing gets played again in another season with the people who are all dying because they got pieces of that football player. And it's like, okay, you had to retread.
Well, and they threw their hands up in the air and said, "We don't know what to do."
maybe they
Yeah.
have a dartboard.
And she ended up dead. It just,
Mhm.
and they killed her. It was a throwaway episode. It was useless.
The
Yeah.
only good thing about it, I think, was the scene with Dean going back, once again, Dean going back to Lisa. Ben calls him and he's like, I'm really worried. And Dean's like, oh my gosh. And then it's because she's dating someone and Ben's freaking out. And
And it's the
so
third day.
there, yeah, so the third date. So, that little interplay, because that fits at least into the thread of Dean and Lisa that we have going through the episode, whereas the mannequin itself is like, yuck. It's just yuck.
Which they completely mirror in the whole Amelia arc up in season 8, where Dean sends Sam off on a wild goose chase back to Amelia.
Yeah.
And it turns out there isn't an emergency. So we have some of that back and forth. Amelia never got threatened by a vampire, probably because they knew most of us wouldn't care. But
She was boring. The vampire was
Oh,
boring.
there's that.
I'm going to say something, Melissa.
I feel like a lot of this season, what they did was everybody in the writer's room wrote ideas down on Post-its. They put it up on the wall, and then somebody threw darts. And whatever got hit, they were like, okay, here are ideas for the season. We got to stick them in somewhere. Because so many of these episodes, it just feels like stuff is slapped in together, and it's not really carrying a story forward. It's just like, well, here's this idea. Here's a random idea. Or the Wheel of Fortune of ideas reappears this season.
The Wheel of Supernatural.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I go back to the whole purgatory thing because that just bugs me. And hell is the same way. At the beginning, hell is so hard to get into, and purgatory is so hard to get into. And then you fast forward a couple of seasons, and the boys just stroll in whenever they please. And Taxi Driver with when Sam has to go in. Okay, either it's hard to get in or it's not. Oh, you found a back door to hell. Isn't that convenient? And
Where was that when they were trying to get Dean and Sam out,
yeah, and what about and I just keep going back to, I know they pulled the souls out, purgatory was theoretically empty, but for Sam to say, I never even thought you might be in purgatory. Why? You've been talking about it for a season and a half? You could have opened the door and looked. Are you in here?
Yeah, but only monsters go there, so they couldn't possibly be. Or something.
So I have a question. If all of the souls were sucked out of purgatory, Benny was there before the souls got sucked out. So how is Benny there? I mean, I'm glad that Benny's there.
He doesn't
because
have
I
a
love
soul.
Benny.
He doesn't have a soul.
Vampire.
Oh.
But,
Okay.
but what they're saying is that the monster souls go to purgatory, and that's why there are souls there. That was what they're postulating in this season, and then later they're saying they don't have souls. The inconsistency is global.
Glaring.
It's huge.
Benny
None
had
of it makes sense.
something because he had that glowing boil on Dean's arm. So
Yeah.
if that wasn't a soul, what was it? Yeah, I hate canon inconsistency.
And why is it always the arm? like you think about season 8 too, where it's like Sam's arms. Why is it always the arm?
Why not
Like,
the leg?
why can't you? Yeah, why can't you have a nice calf sole case? Sure, you know.
Because we would, a nice calf
Maybe
shot.
in the left cheek.
It's really hard to reach there to let them out. It's got to be someplace easy to reach.
And they'd have to wear shorts or booty shorts. And
Yeah, you'd have to wear booty shorts for that, and that would be.
We could have had Sam and Dean in booty shorts. I would have gone for that.
These are the little details that we just don't think of. Mhm.
we also missed some great music in the episodes that weren't deemed essential. We missed Deep Purple Smoke on the Water and David Bowie's Space Odyssey and Nazareth's Love Hurts and Blondie's One Way or Another. We're all in song in episodes that weren't deemed essential, but we did get Kenny Rogers and the Gambler in Weekend at Bobby's.
Yes.
And Bobby never got to eat his cobbler. I felt so bad about that. I wanted Bobby to enjoy that cobbler. And he didn't get lucky either. Poor Bobby.
No,
That's
but
what fanfic is for.
I did have strong appreciation for the fact that the way they figure out where Crowley is from is based on which single malt he drinks.
Mm-hmm.
As a single malt drinker, I really appreciate that.
I just love the whole thing about when Jody's trying to keep the Fed from finding the body in the basement. She sends him out in the yard. He said, well, I got bodies out there too.
And the look on Jody's face was just priceless.
And using big machinery to dig ditches instead of by hand.
That was hilarious. We had a couple good episodes with Rufus. I love Rufus. Love Rufus. In fact, I'm writing a Big Bang right now, and I had to stick Rufus in. So I had to research whether there were people of color in Russia. And there were. Because I loved Stephen Williams. I love Rufus. And I was very, very sad that they killed him off. Very, very sad we lost Rufus in the con worm.
Well,
but
they killed everybody in that one. We lost way too many characters in that one.
Yeah.
I was like, we're done with this thread. Let's just get rid of these people.
Did they just decide we had too many characters and they were going to get rid of them?
They
We
wrote
don't need to do
themselves.
it, Samuel. Let's kill him off.
They wrote themselves into a corner. Didn't know what to do. So like, okay, let's kill people. Who are we gonna kill? Throw some darts.
Everybody dies.
Well, and of course, in Frontierland, we also get that supernatural prescient moment where he says, this is Walker. He's a Texas Ranger. So between calling I'm Batman and, the shout out to Sam being Walker, Texas Ranger, it does make you wonder, since it's supernatural, what did they know and who knew it? I mean,
They consulted the Ouija board.
Well,
that's right. The Ouija board, the spirit talking board, because they couldn't call it a
We
Ouija.
wouldn't call it a Ouija board.
Well, and in the French mistake, they've got the big picture of Jared standing in front of the big picture of himself with the cowboy hat, which I would have completely missed, except Gail posted it in the group recently, and I was like, oh, look, there it is. So yeah.
Frontierland, they have the Phoenix, and we never see one again.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's another just.
So much for
those aren't around. He was the last one.
And I want to know what brand of phone Sam had that it could survive from 1861 and then power back up again. I mean, damn, that's a good phone.
It was a BlackBerry.
Well, built to
Yeah,
last.
they were doing Blackberries at that point. Oh my God.
But I love Frontierland.
It's
The fact that they bothered to make the Bonanza style titles for it.
Mhm.
And
Love
because
that.
I love time travel stuff to begin with.
And that they went for some realistic stuff, like, the bar girl had bad teeth, and Steve's like, whoa.
And things were
No, the
dirty.
whiskey tastes like lighter fluid.
She didn't just have bad teeth. She had some lesions that suggested she had some other health problems.
Like social diseases.
Mhm. Big time. Yeah.
Well,
Uh,
everything was a bit dirty and not as nice as it looks in Western films.
and everybody's looking at what Dean's wearing going, what the hell is that?
But by the time he had his OK Corral moment, he'd had the long duster and he was rocking the roll.
That was nice. That was very, very nice.
Well, that and apparently he's a quick draw.
Which is, I don't have a hard time believing that.
Yeah.
Well,
I can see
they
that.
do practice.
Yes. Yep.
Their
I can see
dad
that.
had him practicing from the time they were young.
Yep.
But I
Exactly.
can also see Dean with his love of the Old West practicing a quick draw just
Yeah.
because he loved all the Western movies. Not that John told him to, but because he always
was
wanted
fun.
to. Yeah,
Yeah,
he always
it was just
wanted to
fun.
be the cowboy.
Well, and they knew the cult because they'd had the gun before.
Mhm.
So it was reasonably believable going up against someone who wasn't worried because bullets don't hurt him.
I also really loved the idea of drawing a devil's trap with railroad lines. That was so smart. And the
Mhm.
churches and creating that. And those are the kind of glimpses I love from this show. And we didn't get that again. Apparently nobody else ever thought of it. But I loved when those things showed up. They just
Right.
didn't always hang around.
Well, wasn't that from an earlier season about the big devil's trap?
Yeah, it's the end of season 2. That's when they
Yeah.
find out about the Hellgate.
Yeah,
But-
it's just sort of
but-
nice to see the history of
Yeah.
well, at this point he was building it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, folks, believe it or not, we're through our time. So, we could keep going, but thank you all for being wonderful panelists as usual. And before we wrap up, let's go around and let everybody know where they can find you online. Elektra?
You can find me at untilmidnight.com, has all my contact info and everything you want to know about me.
Melissa?
Put up ditto.
Yeah, really, seriously. I quit. I can't tonight.
That's Melissa, and you can find her online in Facebook on the TFWNC group and stalking certain writers on AO3.
Thank you.
And
I would be one of the writers she's stalking. You can find all my fic on AO3 under Firesign 10. I'm on Twitter as true_Firesign10. I am also in the TFWNC group and also here on Continual.
And you can find me at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com, at the Supernatural TFWNC group, whose link will be at the end of the episode. But most of the time you can find me here on Continual. So thank you all very much for another wonderful discussion. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more Supernatural here on Continual. So we'll see you online.